Hey guys, in this video lesson we're going to talk about basic strokes. But before we can really get into the detail there, we also have to talk about basic grip. Now we're not going to get into the details of traditional grip here. That is a more complicated issue and really deserves its own video. So we'll do that in a separate video. But we're going to focus specifically on matched grip here, since it has a broader application. And I always do coach my students over the years that match grip should be mastered with their rudimental vocabulary before you even attempt to get into traditional grip. So if you are looking to eventually learn traditional grip, I strongly recommend that you at least get into learning the basic vocabulary, rudimentally speaking, with match grip first. So let's get into some specifics with respect to matched grip. Now I will say up front as a little bit of a disclaimer, not everybody teaches this the same way. I don't claim to have the market cornered on this knowledge. Some people may approach this slightly differently. There's certainly more than one way to do it. I'm going to attempt to convey probably the most common approach, as far as I'm aware, on how we would use match grip for core style competitive drumming. So we're going to focus primarily on the right hand here, since it is going to be just matched on the left anyway. All right, so if you look at a Vic Firth stick, it's really important to identify the balance point for our fulcrum. And fulcrum is just a fancy word for balance point. So the balance point on a Vic Firth stick is typically found right around where the flag is. So if you look at a Vic Firth stick, you see the logo, and then there's always going to be a Vic Firth flag. In most cases, if you put your thumb right over the flag, you are approximately on the balance point of the stick. You could probably inch that up to covering the H, or maybe as far as the TH of Firth, as far as where your thumb is at. And you're going to be in that little 1-inch zone there that's approximately where you will find the proper balance point, giving you enough weight up front on the stick and not being too far front or too far back on where you're gripping it. Now, let's talk about the hand position itself, because this is the important bit. So you want the thumb to be in line with the stick, right? You do not want the thumb to be off to the side. So if I just put my hand in more or less a proper match grip position here, if I turn it sideways, now you can see the tip of my thumb and the side of my finger are approximately in line with each other. So if I took a ring, for example, and slid it down the stick, it should contact the tip of my thumb and the side of my finger at the same time. So we are forming a nice perpendicular fulcrum across that balance point on the stick. So some things to note here. First of all, you'll notice this little seam between the thumb and the side of the hand. There should be no gap there. That should be nice and closed. If I drop the thumb, or if I change the position of the index finger, you notice that starts to open up. That is generally not desirable in competitive core style drumming. We want that to be closed because that ensures a nice control in that fulcrum. And we don't end up moving the control further back in the hand, which for core style drumming is not typically desirable. So the other thing I want to point out is the index finger should be wrapped around the stick, and the pad of the index finger should come all the way around and contact the stick. We don't want the index finger to be hanging off and sort of pointing down at the floor like that. We want it to wrap all the way around. All right, so, and the thumb should be contacting the stick with the pad. We don't want to hold it with the tip of the thumb, because that really kind of creates a pressure that is not perpendicular and sort of puts pressure to flex the stick out that way. So we want the full surface area of the tip or the pad of our thumb to be against that stick. That gives us the maximum amount of control. Now the rest of the fingers, we want to just lightly grasp the stick in the back. This allows us to hinge on the fulcrum and move the stick freely with all of the fingers. Now we don't want to sort of hold it like this, where some of the fingers are now off the stick and the stick is now kind of underneath the arm back here. So when I turn my hand over, now when I move the stick up, I can actually feel it hitting my wrist. We don't want that. All right, so the stick should just come out on the side of the wrist bone. Now one interesting way that you can do to check for this is, because we don't want it to come out too far, because that would encourage a rotation motion, which we don't want. We want that nice wrist motion, and this seam here needs to be at about a 45-degree angle. But we can check to see if that stick, the back of the stick or the butt of the stick, is coming out in the right spot. If we take the other stick and I find that wrist bone right there on the outside of the arm, and I put the stick right in front of that wrist bone, right, I can come down and I should contact the butt of the stick that I'm holding. Now if I've got too steep of an angle here and where I'm likely to start creating this rotation motion, which we do not want. If I put the other stick to check that in the same position, you can see it doesn't really hit. It actually comes in just behind it, right? So that stick needs to come back this way where all the fingers can grab, but not so far that the stick is under the arm, right? So we want it kind of right about there. Now when we put our stick in playing position, you will notice that we have approximately a 45-degree angle from horizontal here on this fulcrum seam on the hand, right? That's the guy right there that I'm talking about. Right, so if we were to flatten that out in what we would call more of a German grip orientation, this is 0 degrees, and then French grip is more or less 90 degrees, straight up and down. We want kind of right in the middle. Now, when we basically duplicate this in the other hand, right, we're going to do exactly the same thing as far as balance points, making sure the fingers are in the same orientation. Now, if we're going to get this 45-degree angle, we don't want our elbows to be stuck out like this on matched grip. We want to be fairly relaxed. This would be something, especially if you're a tenor drummer, this would be something that you want to make sure that you're holding the sticks not out in this wide sort of old school 90-degree angle that we used to teach for matched grip all the time. That's certainly the way that I was taught when I was growing up. Right? So we don't want that. We want something a little bit more relaxed than 90, somewhere around 80 degrees. Nobody's going to come out with a protractor and measure this angle, but it should be something slightly less than 80 degrees or 90 degrees, and should allow you to put the sticks in a relaxed position without the elbows being poked out. All right? That allows the shoulders to be relaxed. It allows the arms and the hands to be relaxed. Again, talking geometry here, we got this 45-degree angle in the fulcrum seam. We got roughly about an 80-degree angle or so in the stick angle here, right? And then we have a slight downward angle in the position of the stick and the hand, right? So the thing that's important here, this is really important for establishing really good range of motion, right? And so I call this concept top of the hill and bottom of the hill, right? We want the wrist to slope down from the arm. So there's a slight slope, right? It's not going to be severe. We definitely don't want that. We don't want it to be the other way, which would be the bottom of the hill. So we come down and it kind of bottoms out. We don't want this either. This is a really common orientation I see in newer players. And if I were to set this up, this means I'm going to be lifting up usually the shoulder and kicking the elbow out. If I set up like this, and again, this is not what we want to do, but here's the problem with this. If I go to upstroke from this, I've already got a massive amount of tension in my arm. And guess what? My range of motion is already maxed out, and I'm only at about a forte kind of 12-inch height, right? So if I go instead to the top of the hill where I'm sloping down from the arm, from the wrist bone into the top of the hand, if that slopes down, so I'm supporting the stick in this sort of imaginary support under the wrist. Now if I got that little nice downward slope, right, I've got full range of motion up to vertical, right? So that's extremely important. Now, as far as the actual angle here, I want the stick to be pointing down into the head slightly. We don't want a really steep angle because that does not promote a really lively rebound. It's not an efficient way to rebound off the head. We don't want it completely flat because two reasons. We're likely to hit the rim when we don't intend to, and we're also likely to by holding the stick in a flatter orientation, we're more likely to let our low notes, sometimes called tap heights, creep up a little higher than we might otherwise like them to. So we're going to sort of generally have this slightly downward pointing orientation to both hands. So that should look something like this. All right, so that is the basics of matched grip. Now let's talk about legato stroke or rebound stroke. This is kind of known, it's the same thing. Depending on where you come from, what school system you go to, or what competitive ensemble that you may eventually work with, you may have heard both of these terms. They refer basically to the same thing. So rebound or legato stroke, I'm going to call it rebound sort of going forward here just so we're not getting too confused, but they do mean the same thing. Essentially what we're doing is we're promoting the natural motion of the stick and interfering with this natural motion as little as possible. So rebound stroke is used for relaxed, fast playing. So anytime when we don't need to create contrasting stick heights, and we're going to be playing something at a relatively uniform stick height for more than one stroke consecutively, we're going to use effectively rebound stroke for that almost all of the time. So that's a very relaxed approach. And basically it looks like this. Sometimes you'll hear exercises like this called legatos, rebounds, or 8 on a hand is a common term. I'm going to give you an exercise here that you'll be able to find on my website if you want to download it. And I'll put the website in the description below so you can go check that out, a link to it. But I'm going to be using an exercise that I'll describe in a moment. But effectively, right, it allows you to work this rebound stroke and use this as sort of a stretching exercise. But also in your case, if you're just getting started, it's more than a stretching exercise, it's a technique exercise. Right? And I assume since we're here learning something as basic as rebound stroke, it's really going to be more about the technique and not so much about the stretch. But we want to play relatively big on this exercise to sort of exaggerate those motions so you really start to feel them in the hand, and we start building the all-important muscle memory, which will be another topic that I get into. At some point, I'll be doing a video about my practice philosophy. Muscle memory is obviously a very key component to that. But again, I'll cover that in a separate video. So, as we're doing basic, what we would call 8 on a hand, right? We keep one hand stationary and we do 8 eighth notes with one hand. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now notice the last one was actually kind of a downstroke. I don't want you to get too hung up on that for now. So it's perfectly fine just to do straight eighth notes in full rebound on all of them. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then on the left hand, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay? Now if you already have some familiarity with downstroke, go ahead and do the downstroke on the and, because that's going to set you up for the stationary stick. So when you focus on the other hand, the other stick is in a disciplined, ready position. All right? That's the least important thing about this exercise right now, though. Again, we're focused more on technique and building rebound stroke. So as we're doing rebound stroke, it's important to understand the difference between wrist and fingers. Wrist plays an extremely important role in rebound stroke, but so does the fingers, or so do the fingers, right? So for the wrist motion is going to probably be somewhere around 80% of this. But if I do 100%, it would look like this, right? This is what I call fake rebound. This is not real rebound because I am going down and hitting the head and then lifting the stick. Right? That is not as efficient. And the reason that's happening is because I'm not opening the fingers to allow the stick to breathe in the hand. Right? So what I want to do is I want to first sort of get that fingerless approach where I'm using 100% wrist and just kind of understand that part of the motion. And then to sort of complete the technique, we're going to open the fingers a little bit and allow the stick to move that extra 20% of the technique. So again, the wrist owns most of this motion with a little bit extra for the fingers. So there's actually 2 reasons why we use fingers in rebound stroke, in addition to wrist. Number 1, we don't want to interfere with the natural motion of the stick. We want the rebound stroke to be as efficient as possible. And if I don't use the fingers, then I'm having to stop the stick and lift the stick, and that's energy I don't need to expend. And I won't be able to play that very fast. So rebound should allow me to play much faster. And that's only going to work if I allow the stick to do most of the work. So I want the stick to be able to rebound. In order to do that, I have to open the hand. Right? Now the fingers need to stay in contact with the stick during the motion. This is important. So you don't open the hand so quick that the fingers get out ahead of the stick and then have to re-engage. That is not very efficient either. That's excessive motion in the fingers. So we want, if you kind of tilt the hand back, and I like to use this with students, to sort of use gravity as a substitute for rebound. And you can feel the stick sort of open up, but it stays in contact with the fingers, right? The fingers are sort of riding the stick up, in this case, and pulling the stick back down. Now I said there were 2 reasons we use fingers, right? So efficiency is 1. Number 2 is by using the fingers in addition to the wrist, we are increasing acceleration into the stick motion. And when we increase acceleration, we are creating more weight or force into the playing surface. So if you've ever heard somebody say to you, I need you to play through the head, I need you to play with more weight, any of those kinds of things, they are talking about creating more acceleration in that stroke. And the way you do that is not by grabbing the stick harder and trying to play harder. All that does is choke everything off and pull out acceleration, and you will get the opposite of the effect that you are going for. So you will actually be expending more energy, getting less volume as a result. So it's really important you stay relaxed, Allow the stick to do most of the work here. And by using the wrist plus the fingers, we're able to get a lot more acceleration. And notice how the stick really jumps off. It's like dribbling a basketball and then catching it right as it comes up. Right? If you are lifting the stick, you're doing it wrong. Now here's an application exercise that we can use. I call this rainbows and unicorns. And again, I'm going to kind of talk you through this. You can go to the website. Again, there's a link in the description below if you want to download this. Very basic alternative to your standard 8 on a hand exercise, where you're just playing eighth notes from right to left. So this one utilizes that, but it also forces you to play left hand lead for a couple of measures, which is something that we could all use some practice doing. So basically it looks like this. We have 2 measures of eighth notes, 1 measure on the right, 1 measure on the left. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, right? And then 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now it continues that left hand lead from the second measure for 2 more measures, and we play 16th notes. So we're just inserting the right hand and filling in the eighth notes in between the eighth notes of the left. So we're creating 16th notes now, but they're left-handed lead. So 2 counts or 2 measures of that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1. Now we end up back on the left as the release. We'll go back to our eighth notes. 2 and 3 and 4 and right hand. 3 and 4 and. Now we do the same set of 16th notes, continuing the right hand lead. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1. Right? Now, should also go without saying, by the way, ideally you want to practice this with a metronome. But again, this will be part of my practice habits discussion. Just wanted to slip that in there while I was thinking about it. So let's play the whole exercise. Feel free to play along if you want. I'll go ahead and count it off. All right, so we always practice ending right where we started, right? So we set up our hands this slightly less than 90 degrees, around 80 degrees, and with the angles all in place. So we finish those last set of 16th notes, right? We should end exactly where we started. And before we break, we take a look and make sure that everything is still, the grip is still intact. We're double checking all the little bits that we covered in the earlier part of this video. And the whole point is to be able to play big and relaxed with a nice springy stroke in our rebound stroke. All right, so check out the next video coming soon. We're talking about downstroke, and I'll give you an exercise to go along with that as well. Thanks for joining us for this video. We'll see you in the next one.